You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 62, a Christopher Morel Miracle. Crawly, don't forget to listen, download, review, and most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the socials. Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and of course on Facebook. You can email us also, flythew670@gmail.com. Crawly joining me today from an undisclosed location. I'm surprised you're sober at this point, Crawly, after a Christopher Morel miracle last night at Wrigley Field.
Well, we were about to have a completely different show, weren't we? It's funny how when you're writing these when you're writing these scripts, and all of a sudden, that's the beauty of baseball, man. That's really what it comes down to. Is just one. All of a sudden, it can turn just like that.
Was it going into the 8th of game number 2 last night, a 18% chance that the Cubs were going to come back to win? We'll get into that in a minute, but first, we'll get into the Kyle Hendricks versus Touki Toussaint game, and you were at that game, Crawly.
I was at that one, and let me just say something, man. Look, I understand people have different ways to get money, but if we're in a playoff push, can we not sell the White Sox fans? Like, I know StubHub and all that stuff, but you can't find a friend that's a Cubs fan to let him go to the game. That just irritates me a little bit. It was a frustrating game in general, as you can tell.
So many White Sox fans last night, huh?
When I was there and last night too, man, be there to cheer on the Cubs. Don't be there to try to make some money. Speaking of frustrated though, Kyle Hendricks, man, we snuck into some really good seats and I was really close. And I got to watch Kyle, and boy, was he pissed off. He was just the victim of a lot of bad luck in the first 2 innings. The problems for Hendricks started with 1 out in the first when he walked Andrew Benintendi. That's on him. He shouldn't have done that. Okay, whatever. Can't walk that guy. But then Luis Roberts going to hit a weak single to left. We're going to talk about exit velocity, how fast the ball goes off the bat. On that single, it was 72 miles per hour. So that is nothing. Basically, if you barrel a ball up, the exit velocity is 98 or higher. So 72 is a weak hit single, which is what Robert did. So now you got 2 on, and then Eloy Jimenez hits a dribbler that traveled 9 feet up the third base line to load the bases. Then he gets Yohan Moncada to hit into what looked like a double play, but the ball was only hit at 63 miles per hour, so it's too slow to turn the double play. So a run scores, the Cubs are down 1-0. These are the cheapest hits in the world, and you know, very frustrating. But the Cubs were able to take the lead in the bottom of the inning. We talked about this last time. Touki Toussaint strikes out a lot of guys, walks a lot of guys, and Tauchman led off the game with a walk, and Ian Happ, who has been struggling mightily, hits a 2-run homer to right center. But the lead did not last long as Kyle Hendricks will continue to get punished by the BABIP gods. Yasmani Grandal hit a single to start the second with an exit velo of, wait for it, 72 miles an hour. Then Oscar Colas hit one 4 feet, but that allowed Grandal to reach second with 1 out. And then Zach Remillard singled on a bunt with an exit velo of 28 miles per hour to put runners at the corners. Remillard would steal second, and Elvis Andrus would single 2 runs, would score, and the Sox were back up 3-2. After that, Hendricks threw 6 innings. He allowed 7 hits and only 3 runs with 2 walks and 4 strikeouts. Another quality start for Kyle, but the problem were that those 5 of those quote-unquote hits came in the first and second innings, and the average exit velocity against Hendricks was 74.6 miles per hour. So they just weren't hitting it hard, but they were putting it where the players weren't. Little squibbers, balls that just duck snorts that died in between the infielders and outfielders, nothing. It wasn't like they were hitting them hard.
Yeah, it was super frustrating. That's a great word for it. They were not hitting him hard, but this is the argument versus soft contact, right? Or versus missing bats. And Kyle, doesn't miss a lot of bats. A lot of soft contact. We heard that on the TV broadcast, almost to nauseous the amount of times we heard them talking about exit velo. If it was a drinking game, Crawly, I would have been drunk by the start of the 3rd inning for as many times as Boog mentioned exit velo. But the pitching and the luck that the Cubs weren't having was not the only frustrating part. The offense awfully frustrating too, especially with Touki Toussaint on the hill.
Right. And if you remember the last episode, I said I kind of predicted a split. I felt like they were going to have trouble with Clevenger, but I thought that they could get to Touki Toussaint. And he was exactly as advertised, what Gabe Ramirez talked about the last show, right? A lively arm, but not a lot of control. He only went 4 innings. He gives up 3 runs on 3 hits. He struck out 4, but walked 5 batters, Dustin. 5 batters in 4 innings. But the Cubs only made him pay once for that.
Yep, only once. The runner with scoring position is a thing as usual.
Right. Tauchman walked ahead of the Ian Happ homer. None of the other 4 walks came back to hurt him. In the third, Nico singled with 1 out, and then Ian Happ struck out, but the White Sox and Toussaint with Nico on second chose to walk Cody Bellinger. What a novel idea. Don't let the guy that can crush the ball damage you.
Wow.
Well, we'll see about that.
Who would have thought that Pedro Grifol would outmanage David Ross?
Dansby Swanson struck out, so the choice to pitch around Bellinger worked. Seiya Suzuki would hit a solo home run off Toussaint in the 4th to tie the game, but to me, the key turning point was in the 5th inning. Tukey led off the inning by walking Nico Horner, and his day was done. Tanner Banks comes in on relief, and Nico steals second. You got runners at second, no outs, tie game, weak Sox bullpen, heart of the Cubs lineup. Happ would line out, Bellinger would fly out, and Swanson would ground out to end the threat. So runner at second, no out, heart of your lineup, you get nothing. And that would have been the start of the Sox bullpen dominance, as their pen pitched 5 innings and gave up no runs, no walks, only 2 hits, and completely shut down the Cubs.
Yeah, it was really, really, really frustrating. But this game was going to get even more frustrating as we keep going.
Right. With the game still tied in the 7th, Julian Merriweather was the first out of the pen. He quickly gets first 2 outs. So you got nobody on base. Luis Robert at the plate, participant in the home run derby, came into the game with 31 homers. And Julian Merriweather hung a 2-2 cement mixer that Roberts crushed to left field. We've been talking about weak exit velocity. That one was out 110 miles per hour, no doubter.
The park barely held it, Crawly. The park barely held the ball in.
Now, Dustin, after getting torched for 4 home runs in 3 games by Pete Alonso of the Mets, you think you would have learned your lesson and not let the one player on the opposing team do damage to beat you, right? But the Sox are now ahead 4-3. Thankfully, Dustin, you guys on the Mully and Haw show in the morning every other week at 9 have Tommy Hotovy. And so this is what he talked about when you guys asked him, why pitch to Luis Robert? Why?
Let's understand last night a little bit better. Julian Merriweather's on the mound. Luis Roberts at the plate. It's 4-4, and or it's a tie game. And you look at 3-3, and it's 2 outs. And you get him 0-2, then it's 2-2. Eloy Jimenez is on deck, who's not hitting great right now. Did you want to pitch around him? Did you want to challenge him? Do you regret how that unfolded? Because obviously Luis Robert got the best of Merriweather, hit the home run that made the difference. Take us through that at bat.
Yeah, I think, first of all, leading into the series, right, we always talk in a pregame series just about who do we not want to beat us, how do we want to handle some of these moments, but also, understanding that, pitching around guys, you still have to do it the right way, right? I think in that situation, you get 0-2 right away on Luis. Obviously, we know he's a dangerous hitter no matter what the count is. And, Luis took one good chase slider below that bounced and then fouled off, some fastballs and sliders just getting to that point. Julian is not trying to throw that pitch for a strike 100%. He knows and understands that, we're trying to keep that to chase, and we're going to let him try to get himself out. And if we walk him, we walk him in that situation. I think, sometimes, we all forget they're human beings, and you can make physical mistakes, but your mind can be in the right place. And we talked about that in the New York series with Pete Alonso. We knew he was a really good hitter, and we didn't want to give him anything, too good to hit. But you can't think of it in a defensive way. You still have to be aggressive, because if you start being defensive, you start backing off. That's when you start pulling pitches like what you saw. All those hits, guys were trying to pitch in off the plate or go to chase off away and just made mistakes. And it happens, and good hitters make you pay for those. So, I think for Julian, talking through that with him, he definitely understood the situation, understood the count, the game score, and all those things. Just just didn't get that slider to chase. His slider has been his best pitch of the year. You know, he's done a great job of commanding that pitch in the strike zone, but also being able to get it to chase when he needs to. So you're going to go down with your best pitch, and pitching around guys with your best pitch is still an effective way to do it. So just obviously just didn't work out for us last night, but the thought process and the approach was still in the right place.
So interesting, by good explanation by Tommy. You know, people make mistakes. I still didn't see how they pitched around Pete Alonso, but I will digress.
Yeah.
But there was also an argument the other day on Marquee during the pregame between, not an argument, but a heated debate between Lance Prostowski, he was on your show this morning, and Cliff Floyd. And Cliff Floyd was angry. Give him the fastball. Try to blow it by him. Go high, go low. But again, people make mistakes. He's right on that. And that was a mistake. But, you know, the Sox were now ahead because of that Luis Robert home run 4-3. In the bottom of the eighth, against a lefty, Cody Bellinger hit one 359 feet to right, but is caught by Oscar Colas, 12 inches away from a basket home run. Dustin fell a little short, as did the Cubs, as they lose 5-3. Alzolay gave up a run in the ninth, and the Cubs went down meekly in their half of the inning. The offense scored 3 runs on 5 hits. The difference in this game, Dustin, the White Sox were 4 for 9 with runners in scoring position, while the Cubs were 1 for 6.
Yeah. When you go 1 for 6 with runners in scoring position, you are not going to win very many games, and the Cubs lost that game. Also, a interesting David Ross ejection during that game.
Yeah, he was ejected, and it was weird because I was trying to figure out what's going on. It happened like right in front of me, and he's really heated. Lane Ramsey came into the game in the 6th. He had this weird leg rocking motion before coming set, and you could see Mike Napoli pointing and yelling at the umps, and they're not calling anything. And so after the inning's over in the top of the 7th, Ross comes out, and he gets heated, and he gets the old heave-ho. Nico Horner did record his 30th stolen base, the first Cub since Tony Campana in 2012. To steal 30 bases in a season. Also, Kyle Hendricks made his 13th career start against the White Sox, tying him for most in franchise history with Carlos Zambrano. How about this one? You love these old nicknames, Dustin, so I put it in here for you. He passed Hippo Vaughn for 8th place on the Cubs' all-time strikeout leader with 1,140.
That's amazing, first of all, that the guy's name was Hippo. Well, we'll start there. And the fact that you don't think of Kyle Hendricks as a strikeout guy. So it just shows like his longevity, right? The fact that he has moved into 8th place. If you would have I would have never have guessed he was in the top 10, but his longevity is there, and he's pitched a long time with the Cubs. So when you strike out 5 or 6 or 4 a game for forever, congratulations to him.
Right. And so now I'm upset because that was the one that I kind of had marked as them winning. I didn't like the matchup of Clevenger Assad again. I didn't know what to expect from Assad. He's making another spot start. And you know, we get some, you know, bad news before Tuesday's game. We'll get into that later. But in this game, right, Javier Assad, once again, another quality start. He didn't give up a hit until the 4th inning. With 1 out in the 4th, Andrew Benintendi singled, followed by a Luis Robert single that hopped up and away from Ian Happ to put runners at 2nd, 3rd. That's an error on Happ, but I was at the game, like I said, Tuesday, and you could see the damage done on the field because of the concerts. So I'm not trying to make an excuse for Ian Happ. I just wonder because that hopped up really funky.
It worked both ways for both teams. He is not playing, Crawly, he is not playing a Gold Glove left field this year.
No, nobody's going to say that. But when I looked at that individual play, and then like my season tickets are up high, so I can see the whole. They're the first row of the upper deck. I could see everything. I can see where the damage, where the field, where the stage was, and that kind of stuff. If it hits it in a certain way, maybe it didn't against the White Sox. It surely did on that play, I think. And so with runners at 2nd and 3rd, Assad threw a wild pitch. The White Sox lead 1-0. Luckily, Cody Bellinger made a brilliant play at first when he caught a Yan Moncada line out and threw out Luis Robert to end that threat. So good there. But in the 5th, Andrew Vaughn walked, followed by a Gavin Sheets home run, and the Cubs were down 3-0. But, Dustin, as we were talking about earlier, glad to see the Cubs learn their lesson in the 6th inning. With 1 out, Andrew Benintendi doubled, and Assad intentionally walked Luis Robert. What happens? Yoan Moncada popped out to short, and Andrew grounded out, and the inning was over. See how easy that works? But Assad, 6 innings, gave up 4 hits, 3 runs, 2 of them earned, 4 walks and 2 Ks. Another very good start for Assad.
Yeah, that 2 earned runs, we'll take that every day of the week, right? 6 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, you take that every time he goes out there. No problem with that at all. Walks a little higher than you'd like, but otherwise, real nice outing by him.
Right. Now, I told you before that I just did not like Clevenger, and he looked weird. He looked like Mickey Rourke. He looked all bloated and strange, and he does that weird wind. I do not like the guy. Sorry.
He's like straight out of typecasting for White Sox fans. If you, I mean, he just looks like he's a White Sox fan on top of it. I just,
Absolutely. He looked like the guy that attacked the Royals third base coach, that William Leguminous guy. But Clevenger had his best performance as a White Sox, going 7 innings, giving up 3 hits, 7 Ks and 2 walks. He had the Cubs hitters off balance all night. They had their chances, 2 on and no outs in the first after a Talkman walk and Horner hit by pitch. Ian hit a soft grounder, and the Cubs had runners at second and third and 1 out, but Clevenger struck out Bellinger and Swanson to end the threat. They also stranded runners in the fourth when Ian Happ and Bellinger started off with singles in the inning, but Swanson was robbed of a hit by Andrew Benintendi on a nice sliding catch. Christopher Morel flied out, and then Jaime Candelario walked to load the bases, but Seiya Suzuki lined out to center. Still no runs for the Cubs. Dustin, looked like the Cubs were dead and that they would be swept by the Sox, but things changed in the 8th. Top of the 8th, Jose Cuas comes into the game, gives up a single, a wild pitch. He walks Tim Anderson and Andrew Benintendi to load the bases, no outs. Worst outing for him since he came to the Cubs. That was it for Cuas, and Michael Fulmer comes into the game. Bases loaded, no outs. They're already down 3-0, and the White Sox are looking to put this away and take their crosstown cup. But Fulmer strikes out the next 3 batters, Luis Roberts, Yoan Moncada, and Andrew Vaughn. That was key, and that's the momentum shift right there.
Absolutely, amen. And I think, Crawly, he did it on 11 or 12 pitches.
Right, almost immaculate. It was amazing. Then Nick Madrigal, who we haven't heard much of ever since, obviously, Candelario comes in. He comes into the 8th to pinch hit for Tucker Barnhart. And of all the guys against his own team, he puts a basket home run to left to make it 3-1. I mean, unbelievable.
You would have never guessed that he was going to do that. Never in a million years.
I wonder what that would have paid out, right? Drew Smiley pitches a scoreless 9th, so I'll tip of the hat to him there. And Gregory Santos, who I saw on Tuesday night, who looked really good, came on to close the 9th. But the Cubs got to see him that night before. Cody Bellinger led off the inning with a double. Dansby Swanson draws a walk, and up comes Christopher Morel. Now, we know Morel was on the cold list. He's been struggling. He falls behind quickly 0-2. But on a 1-2 pitch, Santos throws a 99.5 mile per hour sinker that did not sink. Morel hits one into the bleachers and right center for a 3-run walk-off home run. Morel had the most enthusiastic run you ever seen around the bases since David Bodie hit that grand slam in 2018. He sprinted around the bases. His team mobs him. They rip his shirt off. It was magic.
A lot of magic that night, Crawly, and they needed a little magic going from the Fulmer to Madrigal and then to the man of the hour, Christopher Morel.
Let me tip my hat. Marquee did a phenomenal job. If you watched it, that whole 9th inning, but especially the call of the home run by Boog was great. They did a lot of cool camera work. They had drones going off. It looked really, really good. Now, I have watched that play 20 times since it happened, at least, minimum. I've listened to Boog and JD, Pat and Ron. I listened to Benintendi and Stone and Len Casper. But the best call of the moment was by friend of the podcast. He's been a guest, Miguel Esparza. I got to play this for you. And if you have a chance, whenever you watch a game, even if you don't speak Spanish, maybe you learn a little bit, hit the SAP button. This was Miguel's call of the play. I love that guy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we played that this morning as well to start off the, I believe, the 8 o'clock hour of our show today. Great call.
Great call by Miguel. I'm going to see him tonight. I can't wait. I love this guy. Give him a big hug. But the Cubs should have been swept in the series, Dustin. In game 2, the Cubs had only 3 hits in the first 7 innings. They were 1 pitch away from having their playoff hopes derailed by losing 2 to the Sox. But guess what? Even when everyone else counts this team out, they keep fighting. This season has had its ups and downs. They were 10 games under. They could have quit at any time, but they don't. They believe in each other. And to me, Dustin, seeing Swanson and Bellinger celebrate with Morel, you see how this team just supports each other. They're there for each other. They wanted to get a shot at a playoff run, and rather than seeing their team broken up during the trade deadline, and Jed's rewarded them, and they keep believing in themselves. And to me, Dustin, it'll be interesting to see how far their faith in each other will take them if they make the postseason.
Yeah, they're definitely facing the pressure and doing the best that they can with it. No doubt about that. You're listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's episode 62 of season 2, a Christopher Morel Miracle. And in this segment, Crawly interviews Roy Wood Jr., stand-up comic and correspondent for The Daily Show, to discuss his involvement in Marquee Network's upcoming Buck O'Neil documentary.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, you've seen him on The Daily Show. You've seen his stand-up work. Welcome, Roy Wood. How you doing, Roy?
How you doing? How the hell you doing? No complaints.
The Cubs are in contention, so, that's got to be fun. How now, I'm just curious, Roy, how did you become a Cubs fan?
For me, it came down to growing up as a child. You root for what you can watch on TV. This is Birmingham, Alabama in the 80s for context. So the Cubs and Braves were the two teams. Those are nationally, those are the two teams that came on because they were both funded by, superstations, WGN and TBS respectively. The Braves pretty much only played night games. So I just couldn't never watch them because we only had one TV in the house with cable. And it's crazy to think about that now, considering that every single screen that you own can bring you every single thing that exists. But in 1987, only one TV in the house was the portal to sports and porn and Bruce Willis movies. Like that's what, cable was. So the Cubs came on during the day. So I came home from school. You watch what you can have access to. So you can root for all these other teams. I started out, I'm a Mets fan. I was born in New York. Well, you're only going to watch them when they play the Cubs, you bastard. So you may as well fall in love with Andre Dawson and his Jerry curl and keep it moving. And so it was a little bit of that. Also a little bit of an X factor. My father growing up, he lived in Chicago for a very long time, like from age 4 until his career took him away from the city. He did a radio show with Ernie Banks. So I think that was also part of it as well, is that, my dad was also biased.
Yeah, and when you talk about some of those guys, you're talking about legendary Mr. Cub, Ernie Banks, and Andre Dawson, just fun players. I grew up in the Dawson era, and my dad grew up with Ernie Banks as well, and it was just always, that connection. And once you're in, you're in for life. You know what I mean?
Correct. And so, and people also forget in the 80s, the Cubs were the better franchise than the Braves in the 80s. The Cubs had the playoffs twice. They were close a couple other years. Dawson was the MVP in 87 when they were trash, but they were always a competitive squad. So, that part of it was a big deal. So by the time the Braves came around the corner in 91, 92, it was too late, bro. I had the Ryan Sandberg poster on the wall. So,
oh yeah,
we were done.
And unfortunately, the Braves got Greg Maddux, and then that both franchises kind of turned on that one, right?
Yeah, he slid away, and when it had a great fling, we basically got Greg Maddux at the beginning, and then he just went and had a fling, and got a ring, and got all the glory. Then came back on the back end, like, all right, you're the one I really love, do you? You gave them all your good years.
Roy, I got to tell you, I'm excited. I'm sitting there today, and the announcement comes down. The Cubs are playing the next series. They're after tonight against the White Sox. They're traveling to Kansas City. And for the people that watch and listen to the podcast, we've had Bob Kendrick on a bunch of times. We love Bob, and Bob is along with Buck O'Neil, are the guys that really laid the foundation for the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City. So while the Cubs are in Kansas City on Saturday after the game, there's going to be a Cubs 360 from the Negro League Baseball Museum featuring Cole Wright, Bob Kendrick, Doug Glanville, and J.A. Adonde. So they're going to talk about the Negro League Museum. And then this is where I'm excited. 7 p.m. Central Time on Sunday, Buck O'Neil, It's All Jazz. Why don't you tell our listeners what's going on with that documentary?
So, right now we've been able to do something that basically chronicles, Buck O'Neil's journey through the Negro Leagues and what that meant, not only for players in that time, but for players after him. And I think the thing that's really interesting, and it's also dope that this conversation is starting in Kansas City because Buck O'Neil was there. He played for the Kansas City Monarchs, and Kansas City just as a baseball city, number one. Sidebar: Kauffman Stadium, best fan experience. If you're going, Cubs fans, go at least 2 hours early. And try the limeade, add vodka, thank me later. That's not why we're here right now. But I think it's important that these stories get told. And so, the people over at Marquee Sports, they reached out and they asked me if I wanted to be a part of this. And I'm like, hell to the yes. And for the people who don't know a lot about me, my heart is deep with baseball. And I grew up playing baseball in high school. And I've done what I can to donate equipment and money and technology to my old high school team to make sure that we still have some degree of minority involvement in baseball. Because when we talk about the Negro Leagues and we talk about the past of what baseball was, and we can call it a dark past, because it wasn't necessarily a good thing. I think what's been very important in these conversations about the Negro Leagues is to also, while we talk about the past, take a look towards the future and what we're doing to make sure that the sport stays as accessible to people of all economic backgrounds, not just race, but we're also, we're talking about wealth here as well. They just announced MLB that well, you can't call it the Field of Dreams game because the Field of Dreams they own the name Field of Dreams, but the throwback game and the throwback field, I don't know what it's called for next year. It's going to be in Birmingham at Rickwood Field. It's the oldest standing professional facility in the country. I played my high school games there, and they've retroed that entire field to make it look like something of the era when baseball was segregated. And that's always been the aesthetic of the field. I don't want people to think they did that deliberately for the throwback game. Like, let's make it look like, no, that's so they're going to be honoring the Birmingham Black Barons. They're going to be honoring Hank Aaron at that game, to my understanding. And, even in a conversation like that, it's so dope that that's happening in the hometown, but, so that we can know what we're fighting to keep alive and what we're fighting to keep relevant, in communities of color and poorer communities. It's important that a story like Buck O'Neil's be told, so you understand what this brother had to overcome in order to actually even get a look, to even get a chance to get a chance. That part of it, is very, very important because, when we talk about the Negro Leagues, we talk about Jackie Robinson, and Jackie Robinson was first, and Jackie Robinson was very important, and that was pivotal. It really was. And I think that what gets lost in that sauce is all of these other amazing stories. And it's not just that these players are relevant and the story should be told because they're Black. They were good. They were good. And there just wasn't cameras there to capture all of it. So, I think that part of it, to me, is the thing that, really makes me sad, and to have an opportunity to be a part of anything that captures the history of the game that I love, it was a no-brainer.
Right. And when we talk about Buck O'Neil, there is things that, as Cub fans, I feel like Kansas City, and you talked about Kauffman Stadium, they have embraced Buck as one of their own. But when we talk about professional, Buck O'Neil was the first African-American coach, and he was a coach for the Cubs. He was so integral in Cubs history. Now, as you're doing this narration for the documentary, were there certain things that you didn't know about Buck O'Neil that you learned and kind of brought your fandom to a different level?
The one thing that I didn't know about Buck O'Neil before the documentary was the role that he played in Ernie Banks, becoming a Cub, and this idea of, Buck looking at people in the Negro Leagues and looking at people in the minors and going, "Hey man, y'all should consider this guy." And not even like on some, "Trust me, he's gracious." Think about him. And then that guy turns into Mr. Cub. And that doesn't happen without Buck O'Neil. So, when you look at so many players that may not have come up through the Negro League system and cross the color line in their career, their opportunities were afforded to them by people that did. And, I think that part of, Buck's journey is very, very interesting. He's kind of one of those guys. I'm trying to think. I'm trying like I don't know, Bob Brenly maybe. But these guys who were good as players, they were solid as players, but then they have this whole second life that just as a manager and a scout and doing all these other things that are just as damn interesting as some of the things they did on the field.
Right. And what I tell a lot of our listeners is that it was Buck, like you said, who took Ernie under his wing, kind of really taught him how to be a major leaguer. It was Buck who scouted everybody from Lou Brock to Joe Carter to Lee Smith. And I know Lee Smith took part in the documentary. Mm-hmm. Billy Williams was enduring some racist taunts in the minor leagues, and he quit baseball. He said, "I'm done." He goes home. Who do they send to get him back? Buck mm-hmm. O'Neil. And so it's almost like without Buck O'Neil, the history of the Cubs, the Cubs history, post 1945 is not good, but it was made way better by Buck O'Neil. And if they would have listened to Buck a little bit more, maybe if they even let him coach as a manager, how different things may have been for the Cubs history. Maybe we don't have to wait till 2016 to get a championship.
Well, you want to hope that, but let's be fair. The Cubs also ran into the Ernie Banks in the gang, ran into the Big Red Machine, and then Clemente and the Pirates. The National League was pretty stacked.
Oh yeah,
in the 70s and early 80s. The Ozzy's cards and all of that, but it's hands down, it's just an honor to be able to tell a part of that story. And I think it's only fair that I narrated it because I'm the person who was probably, of everybody involved, the worst at baseball. I played through high school. I tried out in college, so there's that. But you don't get a letter on your jacket for trying out and then getting cut after an hour and then ending up at Shoney's as a server 2 hours later. I tried out for baseball and literally 2 hours later, I was hired at Shoney's.
There you go. Well, in the documentary, our friend Bob Kendricks, they're president of the Negro League Baseball Museum, Joe Posnanski, who is the author of The Soul of Baseball, which I encourage everybody to read that's interested in Buck O'Neil. And then Ken Burns is in it. And Ken Burns, if people remember that documentary, he had a whole thing on baseball. And Buck O'Neil really stole the show. Like, that's the one that when people go back to that documentary, you're like, oh my God, who is this guy? And when you talk about Buck's second life and the career after, he almost had 3 or 4 different lives. But towards the end of his life, the push to build that museum, the Negro League Baseball Museum, that doesn't get done without Buck and Buck pushing to make sure that Negro League players were inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. And, I'm just sad that he missed out on the vote when he had the opportunity to get back in when he was still alive. And then even then he misses out on the vote. And then they ask him to induct everybody and he does so graciously. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah, and that facility in Kansas City, for any baseball fan, that's a, I can say a pilgrimage because baseball is a religion. Baseball is religion at that level. If it's a religion for you, the Negro League Museum, to me, is as important as Cooperstown. And I actually appreciate the fact that the museum exists in one of the pivotal cities for the teams and not in Cooperstown, because they very easily could have just said, "Oh, let's put it in Cooper. Let's build another wing on the side of this," and it would have been fine, and it would have been great. It would all have been all the same great stuff would have been donated for people to look at. Kansas City's more centrally located than Cooperstown, and the museum is in the Paseo district, which is a historically Black part of Kansas City, and there's pure Black culture up and down that street, not just in the museum, but in the shops and everything that's up and around that area. So you definitely get a feeling for what it was like to be around in that space in that time when you walk through those walls. The thing that the museum is able to do that most civil rights exhibits are not able to do, just because they can't, is that the museum gives you a sense of optimism about what could be, but you do not leave with this overwhelming feeling of sympathy and sadness for what was, because none of the players who played in that era ever took a moment to feel sorry for themselves. Because when you look at that era of civil rights, that was stress. Those were wild times. And yes, there was a lot of racism they dealt with on the roads, but most of them were very happy to be playing the game they loved.
And I think, one thing that's really cool when we talked to Bob is he talked about how now MLB The Show, which is how you kind of get to young kids, is through video games. MLB The Show, you can play as Negro players. You can play as Satchel Paige or Josh Gibson or any of the great Negro League players. And so what an opportunity to kind of, to bring some of the past, some of the history alive in the museum through the video games. I think it kind of is something that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's not hitting kids over the head. It's just letting them know, what has been happening. I play MLB The Show, and I've played the whole Negro League storyline that they have, and it's a lot of rich history intertwined within the gameplay. And I think that's the thing that's like really dope about it.
Now, do you see yourself, Roy, coming to Wrigley anytime soon? I've seen you throw first pitches out there. You got an arm, so maybe Shoney's.
I one-hopped one, and Cole Wright from Marquee won't let me live it down, so I got to come back and redeem myself. I'm hoping first week of September. I'm just not sure when. With the writer's strike and everything that's going on, writers and actors strike. It's hard to kind of find pockets because I'm touring now. I'm back on the road as a stand-up, so I have to find my places.
Right. They are doing and being somebody that grew up in the 80s, like in the Cubs, they're doing the first week of September, 7th, 8th, 9th. They are recognizing Mark Grace and Shawan Dunston for the Cubs Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
So, who knows? It might be cool to kind of catch that out. And I showed you this picture before we jumped on. This is you interviewing me outside of Wrigley. You got the Cubs bathrobe on, and you did this hilarious segment with Cub fans outside of Wrigley Field. That was in 2017.
Yeah, I think Hassan Minhaj was with me on that one. I think we were both out there.
Yeah, we were bathing in the afterglow of the 2016 championship, and you were just so nice to everybody, hilarious, taking pictures, and it was a lot of fun, and we look forward to having you back out there.
Well, I'll do my best to get back. I was trying to come at the end of August for that Brewers series, but I think it's better that I come if it's Giants or D-backs or some game that it's not a rivalry game per se, just so I can save my voice because I'm still on tour.
And so if people wanted to catch you on tour, where would they go to find out when you're playing?
Oh man, RoyWoodJr.com. It's my website, RoyWoodJr.com. We're going everywhere from Miami to Seattle. So just check me out there. And I'm covering all the time zones. I'm covering all the divisions if you want to get into baseball about it. So yeah, it's a good time out there on the road throwing jokes, and I hope to see everybody out there.
Yep, and you're a great follow on Twitter at Roy Wood Jr. And again, if for people that are interested, Buck O'Neil, it's all jazz, Sunday, 7 p.m. Central Time. This is a piece of memorabilia that is near and dear to me that I have. It's going to be going to the framer very soon, but it's a picture of Buck O'Neil in that great 1960s Cubs uniform. I'm so looking forward to it. And Roy, I'm so glad you got to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good one.
This is the Fly the W670 podcast, a Christopher Morel Miracle. It's season 2. It's episode 62. Don't forget to listen. Don't forget to review. Don't forget to subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Crawly, how about those standings?
Oh boy, the roller coaster ride continues, Dustin. As we take a look at the standings right here, the NL Central, the Cubs are 2.5 backs of Milwaukee. Milwaukee's in that tough stretch. They've lost 2 in a row. So again, the Cubs could be 1.5 back if they could have took care of Touki Toussaint. The Reds are right there with them, 2.5 back. Pittsburgh 8.5 and St. Louis 8.5. So they're tied for the basement. When we look at the wild card, if the playoffs started today, the Cubs are in by percentage points over the Reds. So you got that, and Miami is on a 2-game losing streak, but Arizona's bounced back recently with a 2-game winning streak. So we got to keep an eye, a lot of scoreboard watching going on still.
Yeah, a lot of scoreboard watching going on, and also heard, Crawly, that you and your fellow season ticket holders got a bill in the mail.
Oh, yeah. You know they're going to be trying to do this while it's hot. So what's going to end up happening is we got our emails about postseason tickets. Usually that happens beginning of September. This is early. And not only that, but what the Cubs decided to do is send their invoices to season ticket holders. And so they're trying to kind of do those two things. If you want postseason tickets, you got to kind of, then that'll go for whatever you don't use. The remainder of the balance will be going towards your next year's balance, right? But if you don't get postseason tickets and you don't do this, or if you don't choose to do that, it's funky. It's going to be more difficult. They want all the payment, or not, I think half the payment up front, like in early September or October, very early for having to pay for 2024.
All right. So I'm sure that you pulled out your wad of cash from all your collectibles and you paid that bill over to the Cubs. Also, Marquee's got a couple of special shows coming up that you want to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to be previewing the Kansas City matchup, but as you guys know, we've had Bob Kendrick on the show numerous times. KC is the home of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. So after the game on Saturday, Cubs 360, there's going to be a special with Bob, also Cole Wright, Doug Glanville, and J.A. Adonde at the Negro League Museum. And the other is the documentary, Buck O'Neil. It's all jazz. One of the most important figures. We've talked about him plenty on this podcast with Bob. It's going to be a must-see for Cub fans on Sunday night at 7 p.m. Don't miss it. I promise you it's going to be good.
All right, going to fire up the DVR. Before we preview the Royals, let's talk about some rosters and unfortunate injury news.
Yep, Caleb Killian was optioned back to Iowa, and Michael Rucker is back up. So Killian down, Rucker up. That was before the game on Tuesday. Nick Birdie worked 1 inning in Iowa with a strikeout and a walk on his rehab assignment. And Brad Boxberger pitched a third of an inning in the ACL Arizona Complex League and faced 4 batters with no issues. But that's not the big news, Dustin.
No, that's not it, Crawly.
Big news prior to the game on Tuesday, we find out that Stroman wasn't going to be making the start against the White Sox on Wednesday. Apparently, he started experiencing right rib discomfort as he threw his bullpen in Toronto. The news came out on Wednesday that test shows he has a right rib cartilage fracture. Zero timeline on when he will be back. Jed Hoyer was asked about it. He said, I have no idea. That's the honest truth. We don't really know at this point. It's not a real common pitching injury. I've never seen that before. So for me to speculate would be false.
So the rumor, or one of the suggestions is that, first of all, usually they throw 30 pitches in these cases. He threw 50 pitches for some reason. Then he supposedly was involved in taking balls during batting practice, and maybe that's where he got hurt, by getting hit with a ball or a throwing motion when he's out there screwing around, acting like he's a shortstop.
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, that's how Stroh plays. And, you know, you want him coming into a game, being able to throw a decent amount of pitches, and he takes pride in his defense. I'm just going to chalk it up to bad luck, man. It happens.
All right, it happens. I got a ton to say on Marcus Stroman. We're a little pressed for time on this one. We'll get back to this later. But the other interesting part now is, where does David Ross turn? Drew Smiley, Hayden Wisniewski, is it somebody from the minors? Looks like the experts are saying that David Ross will go with Smiley next time through.
Right, that's what he said. He didn't rule out Hayden Wisniewski, but we'll see what Smiley has. Again, the rosters expand on September 1st. Ben Brown has been on the IL. So right now, Jordan Wicks looks like a good candidate to come up, former first-round draft pick of the Cubs. So just something we're going to have to keep an eye on. This makes it a lot harder, but there's nothing you can do other than next man up.
All right, this weekend, starting Friday afternoon, we're going to keep our eyes on the Cubs as they are hosting the Royals. And believe it or not, the Royals are even worse than the White Sox.
65-97. They last season is what they finished. Last place in the AL Central. Dustin, for the last 5 seasons, the Royals have finished either 4th or 5th in the AL Central. This was supposed to, they're going to try something different this year. They got Jordan Lyles, they got Zach Greinke, Aroldis Chapman, Ryan Yarbrough, and Josh Taylor. They did lose Adalberto Mondesi and Michael A. Taylor, but the moves didn't work. They're one of the worst teams in baseball. Only the A's are worse. Aroldis Chapman was traded to the Rangers. They traded shortstop Nicky Lopez to the Braves, Scott Barlow to the Padres, and Ryan Yarbrough went to the Dodgers. And don't forget, the Cubs got Jose Cuas for Nelson Velasquez. So we'll be seeing Nelson Velasquez this weekend. But something to kind of keep in mind here, Dustin, is that even though they're bad, we said how bad they are. They're wrapping up a 4-game series with Seattle. They've lost 2 of 3, but their offense has been explosive, scoring 7 runs, 8 runs, and 5 runs. Now their pitching stinks. They're giving up more than they're scoring, but just kind of keep that in mind right now. When I was looking at the hots and the nots and all that stuff, you're taking a look at Kansas City and you're saying to yourself, man, this team right now is a team that has a lot of guys that are hot right now.
Well, speaking of giving up runs and giving up walks, that's the game 1 pitcher on Friday, Jameson Taillon.
Jameson Taillon, record of 7-7, 5.71 ERA. He was doing really good until that last start in Toronto. He went 3 innings pitched, gave up 8 hits, 8 earned runs, 2 walks, and 2 Ks. Awful. Before that, though, against the Mets, 7 innings, 3 hits, 2 earned runs. And against Cincinnati, he went 5 innings, gave up 7 hits, 2 earned runs. We need that guy. That's the guy that we need back.
That's the guy we need back indeed. Absolutely.
And for the Royals, we're going to have Cole Ragans coming in here. When we talk about Ragans, a lot of these guys, again, like when we saw the White Sox and some of these other teams, the Mets, a lot of their pitchers that they started with have been traded. Ragans is 3-4 with a 4.21 ERA against St. Louis. He went 5 innings, gave up 7 hits, 4 earned runs, 5 walks, and 4 strikeouts. He's another one of these guys with electric arms that can throw a lot of strikeouts and a lot of walks. His last start before that, 8-7 against Boston, he went 6.2, only gave up 1 earned run, Dustin, 11 strikeouts to 1 walk. So, again, live arm.
Hopefully that changes on Friday, no doubt about that. All right, game 2 will feel a little bit better, right?
Yeah, you're just hoping that, whenever you got Justin Steele on the mound, you're saying to yourself, hey, I got this. And so with Justin Steele on the mound, he is 13-3 against Toronto, went 5 innings, gave up 6 hits, 3 earned runs, 7 strikeouts. Didn't go 6 innings, unfortunately, but again, in his last 3 starts, he's given up 3 earned runs each time. Went 5 innings, 5.1 against Atlanta, and 6 innings in Cincinnati. He's given up 3 innings each time. So, or 3 runs each time. So let's see what he does against KC.
What's KC throwing back the Cubs way?
Now, against the Cubs, they're going to have Brady Singer. Now, with Brady Singer, he's a righty. He is 8-8 with a 4.91 ERA. Last start against Seattle, no decision. He went 7.1 innings pitched, gave up only 2 earned runs. Against Boston, 6.2 innings, gave up only 3 earned runs. And against the Mets, gave up only 8. He went 8 innings and gave up 0 earned runs. So, these starters have been doing really well as well. It's just once you get past the starters, they got nothing behind that.
Well, let's hope we can run them out quickly. And then game 3, we got Kyle Hendricks.
Yep, the professor, Kyle Hendricks, again, a victim in his last outing of a lot of bad contact. Sometimes, again, when you pitch to contact, that's what's going to happen. The balls just find spots to drop in. He's 4-6. He went 6 innings, gave up only 3 earned runs against the White Sox, went 5 innings, gave up only 2 earned runs against the Mets. And then against Atlanta, that was the bad one. He stinks against Atlanta. 4 innings, he gave up 7 earned runs. But we definitely, with this Stroman injury, Dustin, everybody's got to step up.
Yep, it is step-up time. Let's talk about hot and not now, Crawly. Let's talk about Nico Hoerner and Cody Bellinger. Of course, Cody Bellinger's on the list, but Nico Hoerner back on the hot list, right?
Yeah, real quick, Jordan Lyles, he's 3-13 with the 6.30 ERA. So that's where the Cubs can easily.
3-13. Who cares? The Cubs are going to pound him.
So yeah, Nico Hoerner has been hot for the Cubs as of late. He has really been looking good. 7 for his last 17 with 1 home run, 1 RBI, slashing 412, 524, and 647. And Cody Bellinger, he never leaves the list. 6 for his last 18 with the home run and 3 RBIs. He is slashing 333, 400 with a 611 slug. On the not, you got at the bottom right there, you got Yan Gomes. He's been struggling. 1 for his last 10 with no home runs, no RBI, slashing 100, 250, 200, kind of reverting back to the means, right? And then regressing back to the means, sorry. And then Mike Tauchman, who's just everyone's been talking about, but now he's 1 for 13 with an RBI, slashing .077, .250, .077.
Yeah, Tauchman has been struggling a little bit, has gotten some games off. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him down the stretch. Yan Gomes looking old. Does the Royals, they've got to have a lot of long list on the knots considering their record, but how about on the hot side? Who do Cub fans have to watch out for?
The Royals are very hot right now. Mikael Garcia, the third baseman, 9 for his last 20 with 2 RBIs, slashing 450, 476, 500. Long stalwart Salvador Perez, catcher, 10 for his last 25 with 2 home runs and 9 RBIs, slashing 400, 385, 680. Again, this team is hot right now. One guy that I just want to kind of, a lot of these guys in the last 7 games, these are they're batting 450, 400, 391, 375, 375. The one guy I really want to warn everybody about is Bobby Witt, the shortstop, 10 for his last 27 with 3 home runs and 8 RBIs, and former Cub Nelson Velasquez, 6 for his last 19 with 3 home runs and 4 RBIs. Wish he would have gotten a chance to play here some, but that's that. And so there are a lot of hot guys right now, but be careful, Bobby Witt and Nelson Velasquez.
Yeah, Witt had that inside the park home run not too long ago, right?
Yeah, he's an exciting young player, man.
All right, Crawly, how about some predictions?
For the predictions, I am saying right now that the Cubs take 2 of 3. I'm just hoping the offense turns around. I don't know. I'm trying to be positive after last night, but if you're asking me if I'm confident about that 2 for 3, it's a shaky 2 for 3.
All right, I'm going sweep, Crawly. Christopher Morel woke everybody up. They know they're not getting Stroman back. This team has got to go now, and as you like to say, they got to put their foot on the proverbial neck of some weak teams, and this is as weak as it gets. Cubs to sweep the Royals this weekend. Crawly's got 2 out of 3. I've got the sweep. Crawly, that's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow us on the socials, Fly the W on Facebook, Instagram, and don't forget you can email us, flythew670@gmail.com, and you can watch us on the YouTube channel. That's right. Subscribe to the 670 The Scores YouTube page and do just that. Crawly, happy Friday tomorrow. Happy Cubs just out of the lead in the division. And right now, if the season started, the postseason started, the Cubs would be in the postseason. So we've got to be excited about that.
Postseason baseball. That is baseball at its finest. I hope they make it because I will be there cheering. Go Cubs. Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!